Well, hi everyone. Here we are, another Saturday afternoon, and it's our MADDIE Day. So thanks everyone for being here. I there's lots of you here now. Initially, I think there was only Daniel, but I can see lots more have arrived. So I want to thank you so much for being here, and I'm actually quite excited to. I want to thank you so much. Excuse me, I've got some echo stuff happening. Yeah, I'm really excited today because, as you know, every week I've been promoting Mark Salnokonoko's podcast. And today I wanted to really focus on it. And I'll tell you, as I was going through everything to try and find clips and etc., I just got drawn into it. And every one that I opened, I wanted to listen to the end. Unfortunately, I didn't have time to go through them all. So what I'm going to do is just show you some highlights from them. And I absolutely, without question, urge you to pop along and see not only last year's podcast, which was a #1 podcast in last spring, but also he's brought out a new one called They've Taken Her. And they haven't actually done all of the episodes yet, but they did release, excuse me, they did release the one on Christian Bruckner. And I tell you, if you question anything about Christian Bruckner, you have to check out his podcast and you will see exactly what it's all about. But anyway, first of all, of course, today's episode is dedicated to Chris and Kim, as without them, I wouldn't be here. And everybody who joins me here is absolutely, I welcome them. I see Emily Cheetham. I remember from last week she'd asked or suggested that she'd like to come up and join me. So maybe later on, if she's still around, Emily, if you'd like to come up here and let us know what you're thinking. Have I forgotten anything else, Shirley?
No, I'm sorry. I thought I was on mute, so I'm looking for my mute button. Nope, you haven't forgot. That's everything we spoke about.
Okay. And of course, want to thank not only everybody who's here, but to all the mods for helping me. I tell you, we wouldn't be able to do this. Well, I'll tell you right now, I would not be able to do this without the help from Shirley and Carrie and Claire and all the other mods who are here. So if it goes wrong, I'll just blame them. Anyway, hopefully we've got today organized enough that you'll be able to see everything as I hoped you'd see it. If not, then we'll try again next time. But anyway, I want to start with a video that Sonia Poulton had an interview with Mark earlier this year. And it was such a great interview that I really wanted to show it all to you because it really explains the podcast in good detail, really, from Mark, to give you some idea of what the podcast is about. And that's important, I think. So permission to use it. And it's done through brand new tube, which I haven't found out the details about. But anyway, I'm going to see if I can going and hopefully do my thing here that I'm absolutely trying to learn. I'm getting there. So let's see it.
And what I noticed is that as soon as those stories went on our website, the analytics showed that there was.
Sanokonoko should be joining us from Channel 9 in Australia. Hello, Mark.
Sonia, good morning.
Good morning. Well, it's good morning, of course, isn't it? What is it?
It is.
Just after 6 a.m. there, I think, isn't it?
5:30.
Wow.
So,
listen, thank you so much for joining us. I'm so grateful, Mark. People have always said to me, if you're going to have these, can you bring on Mark? Now, Mark, where do we start? You obviously are the creator of the award-winning #1 podcast, MADDIE. Phenomenal piece of work, 10 episodes, I believe it was, of which I contributed myself, of which you had, well, just about everybody really, didn't you? You've got cops, you've got journalists, you've got forensic experts, you name it, really. So what I'd like to do is go back, first of all, and what was it? Because as a journalist in the UK, I think you know how critical I am about the media's approach to the disappearance of Madeleine McCann. And I felt that people haven't been as forensic as they should have been. And suddenly I noticed this man from Australia was doing this work that British journalists should have done, given that we obviously have Operation Grange, £13 million, et cetera, et cetera. What made you first take interest in the case, Mark?
I just want to check first that you're all seeing it and that you can all hear it okay. It's silly of me to carry on until I check. So is that everything?
Yeah,
everything's fine?
Yeah.
It's such a great interview. So anyway, I'll try again and we'll carry on.
Okay.
Yeah, just some casual conversations with friends led me to start taking a closer look at the case, Sonia. And you know, I was a latecomer. People like yourself have been looking at it from the start and for much longer than I had. But as soon as I started looking at it, you know, there were just a lot of curious elements to the case. It didn't seem to make a lot of sense. Started looking at it more deeply, began to write about it, heading towards the 10th anniversary of Madeleine's disappearance. And what I noticed is that as soon as those stories went on our website, the analytics showed that there was massive interest in the case still 10 years later. And so, you know, I sat down with my editor, Simon King, and Dan McHugh, who was the producer of the podcast, fantastic producer, and we just thought, here's an opportunity to tell a really complex story in the best way possible, which is the podcast, an audio format. We can go through it nice and slowly with all the detail and hopefully capture, you know, all the important pieces and speak to all the important people. You know, the people we didn't speak to in the podcast, of course, were Kate and Jerry McCann. We tried, and also the Tapas 7. They didn't want to speak to us either. But you know, we spoke to a lot of other people, like you say.
Well, you have a phenomenal cast list. I mean, you got the man himself, Gonzalo Amaral, didn't you?
That was amazing. You know, he came to the party real late. We were almost finished. We were up to episode 9, and then all of a sudden, the connections that were thrown out there, he replied and said, "I'm willing to speak," which was great. But in hindsight now, even a couple of years later, Sonia, I think, and perhaps the biggest sort of interview I think that we brought to the case was Dr. Mark Perlin.
Absolutely. We'll get to that in a second. Absolutely. Absolutely. I completely agree with you. So,
but to speak with Gonzalo was fantastic, you know, and he said a lot of things over the course of an hour, which some of the things we just couldn't include because of the legal nature, as you know.
Right.
It's a tightrope.
Yeah. So what did you set out really to sort of achieve with the podcast? What was it that you wanted to convey to people?
It was the idea that, you know, it was what I found as I learned more about it was I was shocked and surprised by what I had come across, which, as I say, people who had gone before me had already known about. There's a wide group of people who have, you know, understood this case and looked at this case all around the world and know these things. But the vast majority of people, the mass media audience, I feel, don't know don't know some of the details. So it was about bringing some of these things to light, and then asking people to go into it with an open mind, and be prepared to reach conclusions on their own, but go into it with an open mind and prepare to be confronted by detail, prepare to be challenged by new information, and you know, and maybe look at this cold case, which we'd heard portrayed for 10, 12 years in a very particular way, to suddenly step to one side, and is there a parallel universe that runs closer to that, but that is very much based in real things that happened on that holiday and afterwards.
And obviously, one of your individual episodes is very much dedicated to Eddie and Keela, the enhanced victim recovery dogs, and the work that they've done. Please, that's one of the most intriguing themes for people, is the discoveries of the two dogs. Pick that up for me.
Yeah. Well, even then, you know, I can still remember looking at the YouTube footage myself, and for the first time, and you see Eddie barking, appearing to alert not once, not twice, multiple times in key search areas of crime scene locations, inside the apartment, inside a hire car, hired weeks after Madeline went missing. So to see the dogs in action, which came with very strong credentials, was that was jaw-dropping, you know, to me. And so that episode was about detailing what happened on those searches, speaking to highly credible dog trainers who would help people understand what was going on in those searches. Were the dogs reliable? You know, one of the dog handlers said, you know, he's never met a perfect dog handling team, but a good dog handling team, which Martin Grime and his dogs definitely appeared to be, were right most of the time. You know, 90 to 95% of the time is what this dog handler said. And Martin Grime, I reached out to him. He was unwilling to speak. He did converse by email, and he said, I think he felt that that some of the work of the dogs had been twisted and not understood properly by people who seem to want to sort of play down the significance of what the dogs found. You know, DNA was pulled from the areas where the dogs alerted. That DNA, as we both know, was ultimately ruled inconclusive, and so that the investigation stopped there. Now, had more could have been done with the DNA, then, you know, do some people look at what Martin Grime and his dogs did? Do they look at that differently? I think, you know, Martin Grime and the work of his dogs is a really important part of the case.
I think it's a huge part, because you only have to look at where they actually did alert. So they didn't alert in any of the apartments of any of the other Tapas 7. They alerted where Madeline was reported missing. They alerted on Kate's clothes. They alerted in a hire car that had been hired after her disappearance. They alerted in the new holiday apartment, I think, that the McCanns had on the on Cuddle Toy, and so
Yep.
it was all the alerts were everywhere where the child would have been, and that in itself I thought was quite compelling.
Yeah, well, as you say, the dogs searched every other apartment of relevance in the Ocean Club Resort, and they hit on multiple other items of clothing, the Cuddle Cat, the toy. You know, these were dogs that were ordered over by the top British search expert within the British police at the time, who's now in Australia. He didn't want to talk, but he brought them over from the UK to search what he thought were the most important areas, the most likely areas where police might find something that happened to Madeline, where maybe a body was hidden. And then the report was drawn up based on the work of the dogs. You know, a really important part of the case, one that remains unresolved as far as I'm concerned, because the DNA remains unresolved.
Tell us about Dr. Mark Perlin.
Dr. Mark, look, we just entered MADDIE in the Australian Podcast Awards last week, and so that involved going through and breaking up pieces of the podcast that were forming part of the entry. So I went back, and me and Dan started listening to the old episodes. What could we put in here? What were the most important parts that would create a nice little package for the judges to understand in 15 minutes what we'd done? Your interview was in there, Sonia. So was Mark Perlin, because his interview was critically important. You know, I remember when we played that episode, where we had it to Simon King at the time, and he was like, wow, this could be a really massive episode in the context of the case, because here was a really top credible guy bringing to the case DNA forensic skills at the leading pioneering end of the scale here, offering to not just be able to solve those DNA samples that were using old technology back in 2008 with his new technology, but to do it for free and to turn those results around super quickly. 2 weeks is what he was saying, probably less. And so when I spoke to Mark and he explained how and why that failed in 2008, which is acceptable because those testing methods in 2008, they were limited, but they're also open to human bias. Dr. Mark Perlin's methods were incredibly advanced, and there's no human bias in what he does. It's done by computer algorithms, which, as we know, can just operate on the nth degree compared to what humans are able to do. So Mark was offering to do this. We put that offer out there to the Metropolitan Police, to Operation Grange. We went all the way up to the Prime Minister's office, Theresa May at the time, trying to get her involved. Office. Everyone kept pushing us back to Operation Grange. They didn't want to know about it. They still haven't contacted Mark Perlin. I was contacting Operation Grange, and in the end I said, Mark, you've got to write them a letter now, coming from you, from your lab, cybergenetics. You must write them a letter. He did. He showed me it. He detailed all the work he'd previously done for the Metropolitan Police. This wasn't some scientific novice knocking on the door saying, I can do this. He detailed the work he'd done for various police forces in the UK, and also forensic laboratories in the UK, assisting them. He was qualified. He was proven, and of course his work is accepted in courts all around the world: Australia, Ireland, the UK, the US. But nobody wanted to know about him, which to this day, Sonia, remains baffling.
Any thoughts about why that could have been?
Honestly,
he
said to me, oh, can you hear me?
Oh, I can't hear Mark. Hello? Hello?
Can you hear me, Sonia?
There you go. Yeah,
okay,
I find it actually extraordinary. You went to the sort of highest political office in the land for a £13 million investigation for a crime that didn't even happen in this country. Mark Perlin, I believe, was actually offering, was he also offering free help as well?
For free, nothing, no charge.
So none of it makes any sense, does it, Mark? None of it makes any sense, because as you quite accurately pointed out, this is not just somebody who just arrived on the scene. This is somebody with a history of doing just this to a very high standard. So I think people have been baffled about why that offer has not been accepted. Do you have any answers for us on that?
Honestly, I'm still baffled. I'm still so frustrated, because I feel that, as Colin Sutton said, what Mark Perlin's offering to do could be a game changer.
Right.
Jim Gamble, a big advocate for the family, had told me earlier in the podcast the way he believes this case can be blown open is through DNA or someone breaking after a lot of pressure. Well, here was Mark Perlin with the DNA methods to break it wide open, or at least answer some big questions around the hire car and the apartment.
Right.
People involved. Could someone be ruled out? Could Madeline be placed in the hire car? But they didn't. Look, Prime Minister's office didn't want to know. Operation Grange didn't want to know.
Astonishing.
I can't work it out. You know, the first half of this year, Sonia, Mark Perlin has cracked open 2 more cold cases through the work that he does. Number one is a woman who was murdered 12 years ago. The police had a suspect, but they couldn't build enough evidence against him. They tested DNA off this woman's genes multiple times over the years. Inconclusive. It was a small mixture on her genes. Mark Perlin gets it in 2019. He studies that DNA mixture. Within 3 days, he's got a DNA match on the guy. The US police in Wisconsin arrest the suspect. The other case that Mark Perlin's worked on this year, a man in prison for 43 years for a wrongful conviction. Mark Perlin tests some old DNA on a woman who'd been killed, on a belt and a tie. A white woman had been murdered 43 years ago. A black man was put in prison. Mark Perlin's evidence and work on that case removed a man who'd been out of prison for 43 years. So Mark Perlin is a guy who not just has the theoretical way to solve these really tough DNA samples. He's out there doing it. And as Mark Perlin said, he's not just, his work can exonerate not guilty people and also bring in people who have committed crimes and who still remain out there. Mark Perlin, get him involved in the case, get him the DNA.
Right. So let's come up to date with this then. So obviously where we are now is we have 3 police forces who are currently investigating the disappearance of Madeleine McCann. We have Portugal, we have Germany, and we have the UK. And obviously in Germany, they have Christian Bruckner as their #1 suspect. We've heard so much, haven't we, from German police that I've never known, my personal take, I've never known police so keen to find a person to fit a crime. What's your take on Christian Bruckner?
Yeah, fell out of bed when the news came through in June, and like you say, the news hasn't stopped since then. Like honestly, I've stopped checking the news every day around Christian Bruckner because the red tops in the UK basically have a story on him, most days of the week. And look, I'm kind of with Gonzalo Amaral on this one. He said that Christian Bruckner would be a guy who's committed some abhorrent crimes according to his criminal rap sheet. Yes, it appears to be the case that he's committed some terrible crimes. He's accused of other crimes that court of law will yet rule on, things that he's tied into with his arrest warrant. I think you have to look past a lot of other evidence to think that Christian Bruckner could have been the guy that abducted Madeleine on the night of May 3, 2007. I think you have to put aside a lot of that evidence in order to think it was Christian Bruckner.
Yeah.
I always try and come at these things with an open mind, but I find it hard to look beyond evidence that is in the case files that we already know about. The German prosecutor who I interviewed a couple of months ago, we've actually got a new podcast coming out, Sonia. It's called "They've Taken Her." It's a follow up to the work done on MADDIE. Hans Christian Wolters is an interview in that podcast, which we'll be releasing soon. He keeps going on about the evidence that Madeleine is dead and that Christian B was the guy who did it. He won't reveal what it is. They still haven't charged Christian B. If you've got a real solid case, the concrete evidence that he keeps talking about will charge someone, or stop talking about it really in public. You're jeopardizing the chance of a fair trial, aren't you? At a bare minimum as well, if you start doing that.
It's like they're all at cross purposes though, because when Portuguese police were recently digging at wells, German police didn't know that they were doing that, and so working together for the last 3 years. I've never seen 3 police forces who have apparently been working together the last 3 years so at odds with each other. It is the most bizarre case, isn't it, Mark?
Well, that's the other thing. You've got Operation Grange. 13 million quid, as you said, has been spent since 2011. They maintain, even when the Christian B news broke, it's a missing persons case in the eye of Operation Grange. The German police, we're talking about a homicide investigation, and Christian B is the prime suspect. But when I asked Operation Grange and Hans Christian Wolters to kind of justify how the 2 investigations had their 2 different sort of ideas as to what sort of case it was, Metropolitan Police said, look, you've got to go back to the German police. It is a missing persons investigation in our eyes still. We see no need to make it a homicide inquiry. The German police, as we know, Hans Christian Wolters said this is a homicide inquiry. It's really hard to think how that could be possible.
Yeah.
It's hard to imagine the German police, if they have this concrete evidence, not showing it to Operation Grange. And if they've shown it to Operation Grange and it's so clear cut, why would Operation Grange still say it's a missing persons case? It's hard to work that out. That was a real circular argument that I was trying to unpick, but I wasn't able to. So I don't know. I don't know what's going on there.
I'm not sure they are able to. I'm not sure they're able to make sense of it either. But the other thing that I loved about your work is you really honed in on the whole idea of how they were fighting to control the narrative right from the beginning. And obviously we still have that now, but just expand on that a little bit for me, please.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think that was an episode that you really helped articulate in the podcast, was this idea that from very early on in the case, the McCanns had been supported by political spin doctors and media support people to help the McCanns weather the media storm that followed. And then I guess you would see that there was some control of the story in a way that raised eyebrows. There was also the hiring of other professional people to help be that intermediary that would convey information to people from the McCann's point of view of what happened. Clarence Mitchell was one of those guys, former BBC, former press man connected to 10 Downing Street as well.
Yeah.
So, what I understood from talking to the Portuguese journalists, and they told me that, Clarence Mitchell was giving information to certain journalists and pushing a certain side of the story that the McCanns would prefer was being told. And then, of course, you have the whole litigation and the libel suits that crack down very hard on journalists and media that sort of stepped outside of those bounds and wanted to question a little harder. To be fair, some of the libel judgments were punishing media work that had gone far, had come out with claims that were pushed too far, and they needed to be dialed in, and they needed to also be punished by the law. That's okay. But I think what that did, it created a bit of a climate of fear from other journalists, maybe particularly so in Britain, where questioning of the official narrative, i.e. was Madeleine abducted on the night of May 3 by most likely a predator? That was the narrative. Was that the most plausible version of events once you started to really look at what had happened in and around that holiday and afterwards?
As a journalist, do you get a sense we're ever going to get a resolution to this?
It's funny, I was speaking to someone yesterday just about this, and I think DNA can help progress the case. It can progress a line of inquiry around the hire car and also apartment 5A, that those DNA database information sets that Dr. Mark Perlin needs still exist. They're still out there. I remain optimistic that maybe someone does the right thing and gets that data to Mark Perlin. I remain hopeful that work done by somebody or does bring new information out that ultimately brings the truth out about what happened to Madeleine. I liked what you said about it too, Sonia, when you spoke about it, was you don't know what happened on the night of May 3. You don't believe there was an abduction, but you're maybe not sure what happened to her that night with certainty. What that is, we don't know enough about yet, but you don't trust the version of events that has been spoon-fed to people. I feel similar. I don't quite know enough to come out and firmly say this is what I think happened. But look, to answer your question, yeah, I do remain hopeful. I really do. Madeleine needs it,
I completely agree with you. Listen, Mark, I think your work is tremendous. I am an absolute fan of what you've done with the podcast, and as many people are, it was #1 for a reason. It's award-winning for a reason. I have no doubt that you will win more awards for it. Thank you so much for joining us tonight and just sort of expressing some of the information that we just really needed, really. And I think that the whole issue of Mark Perlin is one that we really should press. Actually, I think what I might do is actually issue a letter to my local MP just saying, look, this is taxpayers' money. This is being offered. This is somebody with an exemplary record. So, I mean, we are asking people tonight to contact their MPs about all manner of things. So we might as well add Operation Grange to that as well, really. So listen, Mark, thank you so much for joining us tonight. Have a terrific day, and wish you all the best, and look forward to speaking to you. Yes.
Thank you. Could I say one more thing? So yeah, absolutely. Just as I was saying, Dan McHugh and I, we're releasing a new podcast, a new season called They've Taken Her. If you want to jump on Twitter, we've got the Twitter account up, They've Taken Her. It's coming soon. New evidence, new leads, new interviews. We're working on it. We have been working on it. It's coming soon. Sonia, thanks for getting me on the show.
Phenomenal. Oh, thank you.
Glad to be here.
Absolutely phenomenal, Mark. Listen, always have time for you. I always have time for anybody who's prepared to look beyond the obvious. So thank you so much. Have a great day. Take good care of yourself and keep up the sterling work. Everybody needs
Thanks,
it.
Sonia. Thank
We
you.
need more
Good night.
journalists like you, for sure. Listen, take care. Bye.
Lizzie, you're on mute.
Thanks, Shirley. I'm
Yep.
sure you'll agree that that interview gives you a much better explanation of what the podcast is about than I could ever give. And I'm just fascinated every time I watch it, and I've watched it a few times. There was one thing I just noted just tonight, that did you notice the little comment that Mark made about maybe somebody will do something and get the information to Mark Perlin? And that reminds me of when Gonzalo Amaral, no, it wasn't to Gonzalo Amaral, it was after he'd left, but somebody with the Gasper statements that had been given to the Leicester police but hadn't been given to the Portuguese police. And in November, even though the statements were from May, in November, somebody sent a lot of faxes over to the Portuguese police, and right in the middle of it included the Gasper statement. So it was somebody in Leicester wanted the Portuguese police to know about it. And that was kind of amazing. They would not have known about it if this person, thank you, whoever it was in Scotland Yard who sent it, well, whether it was Scotland Yard or Leicester, I'm not sure, but who sent it. So when Mark was referring to maybe somebody will do the right thing and send the information to Mark Perlin about the DNA that is available, and apparently Mark Perlin can do can work it from just details. He doesn't need the actual DNA. So, and I just noticed Mark saying that tonight, even though I've heard this interview a few times. So I hope you enjoyed that. It's the podcast is amazing. I've said that every week, and I really mean it. I wouldn't be spending this live today discussing it if I didn't absolutely believe that it's something that anybody who's interested in Madeline should watch. And also with Sonia, thanks to Sonia, that was a great interview that she did. And you can see it on her channel on Brand New Tube. And she has told us that she'll be joining us in a couple of weeks or so. She doesn't know exactly when she can manage it. She's got some things to clear up first, but that will be great to have her on. Excuse me. And also, when you go to her channel, don't just look at that one. Sonia has been involved in the case for years. So have a look at some of her other videos. She's done a great job. And I really hope that you can see some of the work that she's done on the case in her channel. So anyway, was there any questions on that somebody wanted to ask before we move on? I want to show you some of the clips from the actual podcast so you can get a feel for how great it is. And I tell you that the one thing I think everybody says was how easy it to listen to Mark. His voice is just perfect.
Yeah, it is. And I'm going to act like a silly schoolgirl right now. He's not too hard on the eyes either, just saying.
I'm sorry, I missed that bit.
He's not too hard on the eyes either. So I could listen to him on a podcast or I could watch him on a video. Either way, I'm good.
Well, I tell you, myself, Carrie, Cherry, Helen, and Linda, the admin from Controversy, were helping him over the course of 2 years to get some of the information together, and we gave him all the links so that he could get the actual information. I remember one night just towards the end of the podcast where they needed the information on they needed proof of the fact that Gonzalo Amaral had actually said about the body being frozen. And I remember I stayed up all night and I was determined to find it. Wasn't sure if I could actually find Gonzalo actually saying that. And I was so happy when I finally did. And of course, he was able to use that in the podcast. So I'm pretty proud of that. But he's an amazing chap. I have to say, I've chatted to him often. He puts up with me, and he's just a really, really nice bloke. And I think that goes a long way when you're looking for somebody to listen to somebody for that 10 hours or whatever over the course of the podcasts. It's always nice to know that you're hearing not only somebody who's so competent as he is, because I mean, he's done stuff we could only wish that other media would do. Although from what I understand, they are prevented from being able to write articles on anything other than what the McCanns provide. And that must be really frustrating for a lot of people. But I guess for Mark, being in Australia, it was something he was able to do. And I remember when he did do one article, the Sun actually took it and wrote it, because although they can't actually claim the situation with the McCanns, they can write about it from other people. That's happened a lot, I think, in the case, and particularly in the early days when I can't remember his name, whatever his name was. Although they couldn't write specifically about things, they could actually quote the Portuguese newspapers, and that was their way around it. As it turned out, from the Express, they actually were sued by the McCanns, as the McCanns sue everybody who tries to get the information from the police files into the UK. And not a lot of people realize that all you see in the UK media is basically articles made by the McCanns, and the actual police files are not available to the UK, which is why I started my channel, and all videos, my 400 or so videos that I've done between 2011 and 2012, with a few since, are dedicated, because this is my passion. This is my reason for doing anything regarding MADDIE, and that is to the UK, the information about the police files. The McCanns had the police files translated and kept them to themselves. And in actual fact, if you go onto their I'm not sure if it's their website or their at that time Facebook group, I can't remember, but they specifically, it's been said, we do not want to hear anything about the police files or you'll be banned, that kind of thing. Just shows you they don't want the police, the UK public to know. And that's why we exist. That's why we're still going for 13 years. Because the UK do need to know about the police files. It's up to them. It's up to everybody to decide what they want to believe, but at least form an opinion with the knowledge of what is available. And well, I think you can tell I'm kind of passionate about that. Anyway, yeah, that was that was the best introduction that I could have given for this. I'm so pleased Sonia gave me permission to use it, because I could not have explained it better than that. She did a great interview with him, and Mark is just I have to say, the loveliest of people. He really is. So anyway, sorry, Shirley, was there any questions that came up?
There was one just a minute ago. Sorry, I got distracted listening to you, so let me pull it back. Yeah, so, devil's advocate, I mean, and I'm sorry, I don't know if you're a male or female, but that person's, just making comments that could, lead off to things to talk about. This one. This is the one that, because coming into this case, not knowing very much, I've said this before, and listening to Mark's podcast, I still can't get over the fact that Dr. Perlin's offered to do all this for free, and they're not doing it. That makes no sense, and that's what Devil's Advocate says. Why is Dr. Perlin's techniques accepted everywhere except for when it comes to the McCanns?
Well, I think it speaks for itself. I mean, I didn't know until I saw that interview that Mark actually went to the Prime Minister. Theresa May didn't want to know. That in itself, I think, proves to anybody that is questioning the case why this case has not been solved, along with the fact that Scotland Yard are still asking for money. Operation Grange, I think they're up to, don't quote me on this, but it's something like $13 million, sorry, that they're spending, and they're still asking for money. I personally, I have a belief that Scotland Yard, Operation Grange, are holding off because I think underneath, although their remit was just to look for the abductor as such, they have the ability to look at the fund and anything UK related. They don't have the ability to do anything about the actual investigation, as far as I know. So, but in the background, they could have looked into the fund and lots of other things UK related. I have always belief in them that not many other people share, because I actually, back in, I think 2013, when they first opened Operation Grange, again, I can't be sure of the date, I think it was around then, I spoke for actually quite a few hours to one of the detectives, on different occasions, of course, one of the detectives, and actually three of them, because I had his direct number and then other people would pick up and I'd chat to them. So I asked them specifically, because at that time everybody was saying it was a whitewash. So I asked them specifically, was it a whitewash? And he assured me that everything from the case went into the computers, just like any other murder case. And that stood out to me as something to take note of, that he actually, can't remember his actual words, but it was the same as any other murder inquiry, is what he said to me, as I recall. So if you take that into consideration, along with the fact he is, at the time, I'd had several, I had the forum with my reference information, and I also had the videos. And he actually got back to me and asked me to send the link for them. So, I mean, that told me a lot in itself. But when I asked him if I do send stuff, will it get looked at or whatever, he'd said that any information that was not really credible, they didn't look at. But he said, I can assure you that everything that we do look at is entered into the I've forgotten the name of it, the computer anyway, and it's processed accordingly. I had every faith in them then. That I also asked him, well, if that's actually when he mentioned about the murder case, because I asked him specifically, I said, well, for one example, Jerry McCann claims that he went to the front door when he did the statement on May the 4th, but on May the 10th, and in their subsequent video, he said they entered through the patio doors. So I'd said to him, that's what I would consider something which could be considered a lie, presuming that he was very specific on his May the 4th, that he unlocked the door with a key. There's one thing that memory gets in the way, but when you're very specific, I remember I unlocked it with a key and entered the apartment. And then a few days later, when they did the second interview, which is what they usually do to, question whether first and second interviews match, he'd said he entered through the patio doors. And when I asked the detective with Operation Grange if things like that are looked at, that's when he assured me that he said that's why it's a murder inquiry. I'm pretty sure those were his words. I know it was when I asked him that particular question. Since then, I am not sure what's happened, because they seem to have lost a lot of credibility. But on the other hand, we don't know anything. We have no idea what their inquiry is dealing with. I mean, they could have everything there to show that the McCanns are involved and complicit with what happened. We would never know. And that's why I absolutely believe that is, they're going under the guise of it just being a remit for abduction. But have they dealt with the fund and got information on that? Have they dealt with all the details that all of us sent in? But they're not going to tell anybody. And apparently all the police have been sworn to secrecy. They had to sign a document to say that none of this can be made public. So I cannot, talking logically, I cannot believe that a police force like Scotland Yard, Operation Grange, could actually justify 13 million to look for one child. So to me, there is another reason why they're hanging on. It's not about looking for the kidnapper. I absolutely, in my opinion, believe that they know everything, but they don't have the ability to actually do anything investigation-wise regarding the case, as far as I know anyway. And therefore, I think they're hanging on till the Portuguese police make some move. And as I'm pretty sure that the Portuguese police do have just about everything they need, except, as they have quoted, they don't have the body and they don't have somebody who's confessed to anything. And I think either one of those two details may bring the investigation to a close. Gonçalo Amaral claims that it's very political and that he believes it will be solved when political will does that. So who knows? Who knows how it's going to go? We can just hope that one day it will be. So anyway, with the podcast, Mark brings up things which none of us, I don't think, he's so deep into everything that even those of us that have been working on this for 13 years have no idea of, and that's why he was so great. So I'm hoping that most of you who are watching, thank you so much for being here, would actually take time to go and listen to the podcast. So actually, Shirley, if there's no more questions at the moment, or if I didn't answer the last question, I want to show you just a few little clips to give you an indication of what the podcast is about. So was there anything else for now?
No, nothing really, except for Suzanne asked, and I asked you this privately, and maybe you don't want to answer it, but I know that you've been in contact with Mark. I think people would really like it if we could get him on the pod, or on this, do one of these episodes. I think everybody would like to hear from him personally, but I mean, I know that he's busy and everything. Just saying that there's a lot of support for that.
Yeah, and you know what? I did message him this week because last year I'd arranged to do a thumbnail. Unfortunately, I lost all my my hard drive from last year, so all of the details about the podcast, etc., are on that hard drive. And I'd asked him if I could use the 9 News picture. And I remember at the time he said, "Don't worry," he said, "you'll be the first. I'll send you the, you know, the graphics or whatever." So anyway, I figured you maybe I should just double check again. And sadly, he hasn't obviously had time, because he's great. He always gets back to me. It's just not always immediately. And what I did ask him was, realizing that he's probably so busy, and also we haven't quite got that professional look yet. So I suggested that hopefully one day when we do, that he'll come and join us. But I also asked him if he could just send a special message to all of you to probably, I don't know what he would have put in it, but just a message to you all. And sadly, he still hasn't checked the email. If not the email, the messenger. But if he does get back to us, I will let you know next Saturday, and maybe he will let us know that one day when we've got it straight on here, that he'll come and join us. In the meanwhile, we've Sonia has agreed to come on. Isabel McFadden has also agreed to come on, and that is great, because she's almost she's very close to the actual investigation people, you know, Portuguese. She is Portuguese, lives in California, but she does a great job. I mean, if you want to know anything about the case, especially from the Portuguese point of view, then MADDIE Case Tweets is her Twitter name. And she is great. So she said she will join us at some point. And actually, I was thinking, listening to the podcast, I'm in touch with Pat Brown. I haven't spoken to her for a while, and we laugh because we both have different opinions. Pat absolutely believes it happened on and also with the Smith sighting. And as you know, I have different opinions, but we both laugh because we still get along. I mean, this is how it has to be. You don't, I mean, she's lovely, and you don't have to have the same opinion to enjoy, you know, being friends with somebody. So who knows, maybe I'll persuade Pat to come on. And who else would there be? I was actually listening to Peter. Oh, sadly, I can't remember his second name, but he was on the podcast too. So maybe I'll be in touch with him to come on. Maybe he won't, because I can't remember his second name. But I've got this issue where I sometimes have difficulties with names. So if you'll forgive me on that. Anyway, I want to try. Hopefully Claire helped me today. And hopefully I've set everything up so that we don't have too much trouble to open the paging for. So first of all, this, if I'm lucky, should be the introduction to the podcast. So let me try. And just give me a couple of minutes. I have to concentrate. Or not a couple of minutes, but just hold on. I will find it. I just don't want to get the wrong one up. Okay, we'll have to go to this page first. Okay, I found it. So this is the actual podcast that you can see. And Carrie's probably going to give you the link for it. You can see all the playlist there, and these are all the episodes going back down to the very first episode, and this is the introduction. So let's play that. It's just for a minute. Actually, I think it takes a little while for it to play, so hopefully not too long.
We're just hearing that a search is underway for a 3-year-old British girl who's gone missing in the Algarve area of Portugal.
Someone's taken her. Maddie's gone.
Words cannot describe the anguish and despair that we are feeling as the parents of our beautiful daughter, Madeline.
Parents of Madeline McCann are now considered formal suspects by the Portuguese police authorities.
We have played no part in the disappearance of our lovely daughter, Madeline.
There are days when you just want to get under the duvet or just want to be in a coma till it's over, just to relieve the pain and get some peace, but you can't.
My name is Mark Salnokonoko, and I'm a reporter for 9.com.au, and this is a podcast called MADDIE. The MADDIE podcast series explores what many believe is the well-known story of Madeline McCann's disappearance. But this is an investigation of the evidence that could make you question everything you thought you knew about the case.
Now, that was the introduction. What I want to show you is just a small part of the first episode, which was They've Taken Her. And the reason I want to show you, just share randomly actually, this particular episode coming up is the one that I think anybody who wants to learn about the case really should just take time to watch this episode, which explains so much about early part of the case and what happened and those involved. And let's just look at a couple of random clips from it so that...
MADDIE is brought to you by 9.com.au. To enjoy some of our other great shows, such as NRL podcast Six Tackles with Gus, or our deep dive into the royal family, the Windsors, head to 9.com.au/podcasts, or search for us wherever you listen.
In the following podcast from 9.com.au, we are not suggesting Kate and Jerry McCann were responsible for what happened to Maddie or are lying. Her case is simply a mystery, but they were considered suspects by the Portuguese police, and we examine why that was and why the questions about what happened to Maddie haven't gone away.
We're just hearing that a search is underway for a 3-year-old British girl who's gone missing in the...
Madeline's gone.
Words cannot describe the anguish and despair that we are feeling as the parents of our beautiful daughter, Madeline.
Parents of Madeline McCann are now considered formal suspects by the Portuguese police authorities.
We have played no part in the disappearance of our lovely daughter, Madeline.
There are days when you just want to get under the duvet or just want to be in a coma till it's over, just to relieve the pain and get some peace, but you can't.
I just ran back into her bedroom, and literally at that point, the curtains, which were closed, just kind of flew open. And that was when I noticed that the window was open as far as it could go, and the shutters outside had been raised all the way up. And then I just knew straight away that someone had taken her.
Madeleine McCann was just 1 week from her 4th birthday when she mysteriously 2007 while on holiday in Portugal. Pretty much from the night she disappeared, from the moment her mum Kate screamed out, "They've taken her," Madeleine has been the world's most famous missing person. As you heard, right from the start, Kate and Jerry McCann were insistent that their daughter had been abducted, probably by a pedophile or a human trafficker, in a targeted and sinister attack. They believed someone had been watching their family as they holidayed in the resort town of Praia de Luz. A predator, they said, had been observing the way they left their 3 young children alone each night while they ate out at a nearby restaurant with friends. And then, on the evening of May 3, in the hours approaching midnight, an intruder seized a tiny window of opportunity, perhaps a window as small as 120 seconds, pounced and stole Madeleine while she was sleeping. That's Kate and Jerry McCann's story behind Madeleine's disappearance, and ever since then, continued to pursue the abduction theory. However, there is another side to that story. My name is Mark Salnokonoko, and I'm a reporter for 9.com.au, and this is a podcast called MADDIE. The MADDIE podcast series explores what many believe is the well-known story of Madeleine McCann's disappearance. But this is an investigation of the evidence that could make you question everything you thought you knew about the case.
I've read enough and I've seen enough to say that there are questions to be asked about the perceived and accepted narrative as to what went on.
That's Colin Sutton, a retired homicide detective with London's Metropolitan Police. Now, over his long crime-fighting career, Colin led more than 30 successful murder investigations. His most notable takedown was Levi Belfield, an English serial killer. Belfield was a real nasty piece of work. He's currently serving multiple life sentences for 3 murders, including the high-profile abduction and slaying of schoolgirl Millie Dowler in 2002. Millie was just 13 years old when Belfield killed her as she walked home from school in Surrey. I've spoken to Colin a number of times about Maddie. Not only is he an experienced detective, but he's followed this case really closely. He's been to Praia de Luz and spent a great deal of time examining the police files. Colin has been a great source to bounce thoughts and theories off, and during one of our phone conversations, Colin said something that for me, well, it kind of sums up the Maddie mystery in a lot of ways.
The difficulty that I have with it is actually, whichever way you look at it, you've got to kind of believe something that's almost incredible. You've either got to believe that there was a chance abduction of a 3-year-old, nearly 4-year-old girl from her bedroom in a holiday resort, or you've got to believe that it was a targeted abduction by, an organised gang who took the chance that they were going to have enough time to mount that abduction during a window between checks and between adults and parents coming around that they didn't know how long that window was going to be. It's difficult to think of a sort of professional criminal taking such a chance. Or at the other end, you've got to say that you've got to believe that 2 parents and their 7 friends would be able to concoct a cover story and all stick to that story for 10 years and there never being a chink in it and nobody ever going back at it. So whichever of those kind of choices you look at, you've got to say that each of them has a degree of incredible facts mixed with it, and you've got to kind of think to yourself that whichever of those it comes down to be in the end, and whatever the truth is actually a bit fantastic in this case. It's a wholly exceptional set of circumstances.
I think Colin is totally right. The Maddie mystery is a wholly exceptional set of circumstances.
So I think, and I hope like myself, once you start listening to it, you just want to keep going. I could not stop. I was looking for clips to play, and quite honestly, all I did was carry on listening to the end. And of course, I didn't have time to listen to all the 10 podcasts. So I thought I'd just play you that little clip. So, hopefully you will go there. You won't regret it. And Shirley, you've actually listened to it just recently, haven't you? Well, yes, Shirley has listened to it recently and loved it. And she's obviously got something busy right now. But that's okay.
Sorry. I had a dog issue. I'm sorry. What did you ask?
That you've actually watched it and you really enjoyed getting through it and right the way to the end, right?
Yeah, yes, very much so. And I've actually sent it out to a few friends, and they're listening to it too, and they're kind of hooked. They're definitely hooked on it. But yeah, and I keep thinking, what is it about it other than, he has his voice is easy to listen to. So, but one of the things that I like is even when he's presenting the facts or the things that he's finding, you can't tell what he believes. I mean, I still wouldn't know if somebody asked me, what do you think he thinks? I don't know. He just literally just presents things. And then when some things seem very one-sided, he'll counter it with, but there's also this, it's very middle of the road. And that's what I like.
Yeah, I noticed in my discussions with him that, of course, everything we gave him was a link. He didn't want our opinion as such. He just needed links, which we were able to provide for him. He also, he obviously trusted us enough to listen to us, but he also knows that I have my thoughts on something happening earlier. And that is based on the fact that the inconsistency on the morning of the Tuesday, along with the fact that I have not found one proof. A lot of people said they saw Madeleine, but there was no real proof that she was actually seen before any time after the Sunday, to be honest, that I found. The one thing I haven't discussed with him is something which I only found recently, and that is because I believe something happened earlier, it's my responsibility to explain how the crash records and the nannies believed that Madeleine was in the crash. And through that graphic, which I keep telling you about, that I took 2 days to do and wondered why I bothered doing it. But I was going through it one day and suddenly I remembered that back in 2008, I'd questioned the fact that the crash showed one child in and one child out. And when I scrutinized the graphic I've made, which just had all the crash times and for Madeleine and the twins, that in fact showed me that Russell O'Brien, who had a child that was only 3 months difference in age, had similar hair color to Madeleine, and whatever he was doing separate to Jerry and Kate, they always seemed to arrive, not always, but for the most part, arrived at the crash at exactly the same time or very close to the time that Jerry and or Kate arrived, whether to drop them off or pick them up. And what suddenly I had a light bulb moment that I realized the one possibility of what that could do is that they, for whatever they were doing, they arrived there. Russell O'Brien sent his child in, And Jerry, who the nannies had said, yes, we saw Jerry with Madeleine. Jerry went in at the same time as Russell's daughter. And so all the nannies would then, a week later, when they were asked in their interviews, would say, yes, we saw Jerry and we saw him with Madeleine, or we spoke to Jerry. And that's when I realized that it wasn't a substitute as such, which I know has been discussed. It's more of nothing was actually said. It was just that it was taken, if you understand what I'm saying. So I don't think I've actually discussed that in detail with Mark. And he laughs at me, and he does take me seriously when I said that I believed Madeleine, something happened to Madeleine earlier. But as of right now, it's not something that he's progressed to detailing. I am wondering and hoping that he will look at, I'm not sure if I've still got the video where I went through the details about the sightings of Madeleine, but I'll certainly make sure that I either do it again or I get a copy to show him that, Mark, there is not one sighting that I can find. That surely, and he trusts me, so I know that he will listen to me. Who knows? Maybe he might suddenly realize that this is a possibility. So we'll wait and see. But he is great, and I think by now you all know that he is well worth watching. So if I may, I just want to show you a little clip of his latest podcast that he's only done one episode so far. They put it out because it's about Christian Bruckner, which is current. So I'd like to just play you a little bit from that, so you get an idea of how great this particular episode is regarding Christian Bruckner. It's on the video They've Taken Her, and let me see if I've got it.
Lizzie, just real quick, you still plan on having Emily come up, right?
Yes. Is that okay?
I think it is. I just wanted to make sure. Okay, that's fine.
Okay.
So when the Christian B news broke, in the morning I sent out a tweet about my interview with Amaral. I wrote how Amaral seemed to have foreshadowed the Christian B development with an unnerving degree of accuracy and detail. About 2 hours passed, and then I started to get calls from media outlets in Australia and New Zealand.
A German has been identified as a prime suspect in the disappearance of Madeleine McCann.
I just want to check. Can you hear it okay?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great.
I'm joined now by Mark Salnokonoka from 9.com.au. He's also the host of the podcast MADDIE.
I'm joined now by Mark Salnokonoka, who works for 9.com.au.
Joining us now is Australian journalist Mark Salnokonoka, who is the creator of the award-nominated #1 podcast on the McCann case.
Mark Salnokonoka from 9 News in Australia is on the line, and with us, he's just launched a new podcast about this case called MADDIE. Mark, hello.
Hi, Heather.
Are you convinced of the case?
So I guess immediately what my mind went to, Heather, was that I interviewed Gonzalo Amaral, and he was the lead detective on the case back in 2007. And I interviewed him last year, April 2019, so that's 14 months ago. Now, what he told me in that conversation, which lasted about an hour, he said, I was asking him about why British police seemed disinterested in DNA evidence that the podcast was looking at and why it wasn't being deciphered using modern technology. And he told me, this is what he said. He said the British police were interested in wrapping up the case and that they would use a German pedophile who was in prison right now, and that would be the way that the case would be closed. So he said these things 14 months ago. He spoke about a vehicle that had been taken to Germany that had been forensically tested. It was really unusual to hear what Gonzalo Amaral was saying 14 months ago. suddenly happen overnight.
Mark, so he was saying 14 months ago that the British police were concocting a plot as long ago as that to blame it on somebody and make a scapegoat.
That's exactly what he said. And I was staggered when he told me, but he broke it down bit by bit, and there it was today, down to the vehicle, down to the fact it was a convicted German pedophile currently in prison. People will look at that for what it is. Is there a wider conspiracy, or is this guy the guy who took Madeleine and maybe killed her that night?
Hans Christian Wolters is the German prosecutor who declared Bruckner a prime suspect. As the stories rolled in about Christian B., some really strong comments and quotes were attributed to Wolters. I'd wondered if some of his comments were being misinterpreted, so I contacted Hans Christian Wolters, requesting an interview. He agreed, and I was pleasantly surprised. He made no demands to see or vet any questions.
Do you know with 100% certainty that Christian B. was in Praia de Luz on the night that Madeleine vanished? Is that certain?
I cannot say this in percent. We have some evidence that he killed Madeleine McCann, but I'm not able to say on which day exactly. So because of the fact that his mobile phone was in the area where Madeleine McCann lives and was kidnapped, I think that he was in the Ocean Club on the 3rd of May in 2007.
Okay.
One day before this interview, Australian TV show 60 Minutes ran a report which claimed Bruckner's phone had a cell phone tower belonging to the Ocean Club Resort, the resort where Madeleine went missing from. That cell phone ping, 60 Minutes said, put Bruckner in close proximity to the McCann's apartment on the night Madeleine went missing.
We know that the phone number which was used by our suspect on the 3rd of May 2007 was connecting in the mast belongs to the Ocean Club in Praia da Luz.
So what you're saying to me is that you can place Christian Bruckner at the scene?
Yes, we think so.
That explosive angle, placing Bruckner at the scene, was heavily reported and repeated by British tabloids and media worldwide in the days that followed. But could that be correct? A cell phone security and surveillance expert I've spoken with told me that the Ocean Club Resort never owned a cell phone tower in 2007. In the Portuguese police files, there are no cell phone towers that are owned or belong to the Ocean Club Resort. Only cell phone masts around the town, which are owned by the Portuguese telecommunications companies. I wanted Wolters to clarify this.
The cell phone tower in question, it is possible that it covers a radius of distance, and the ping of the cell phone to that tower could come from anywhere inside that radius.
Mark, Mr. Wolters does not know how far-reaching the radius of the phone mast is. So he presumes that the suspect was in the Ocean Club. He is presuming that, but he does not know for certain how wide the radius of the phone mast actually is.
So I think from that, you can tell that any of the details about Christian Bruckner being at the Ocean Club are not correct. In fact, I believe there was only one mast in Praia da Luz. I can't say that for sure. And that mast covered the whole of the area. So he could have been at his home, but the German police are placing him at the Ocean Club where there isn't a mast. So that tells you, excuse me, right there, that anything you hear about Christian Bruckner, and if you listen to the podcast, it's actually quite amazing that this chap, Hans Christian Wolters, he can't answer most of the questions that Mark asks him. He doesn't know. He's not allowed to say. It's an amazing podcast in itself, and this is They've Taken Her. It's separate to the MADDIE one. But there is actually one clip which I do want to show you. If you can just give me one sec. Before maybe, hopefully, Emily can come up shortly. Let me just get this clip. It's okay, that's the wrong page, but never mind. We hopefully will get there. That page is a great page to go to. It gives you the information on all the episodes. So I want to go to, I believe this is the last clip, and let's just see. Mark was actually kind enough to include us in the credits at the end. So humor me. I let me see if we can find them. And then after this, I'll ask if Emily can come up. That would be great. So I've actually got to redo it again to actually get it. So so if you did you hear a blank there?
Yep, we
was
didn't
that
hear
totally
it.
blank? Okay,
Yep,
I
didn't
will.
hear it.
I will try again.
Okay. Okay, the video's coming up. Okay, we can hear it.
Thank you for the messages and all the information which has been sent to me. Dan McHugh, Simon King, and also need to know is that there's still more evidence and parts of this story that I couldn't tell you about. There are some elements to this mystery that contain too much of a legal risk to include, such as the incredibly delicate nature of reporting this case. We'll keep pursuing the DNA data and following up the line of inquiry that Gonzalo Amaral talked about, the international pedophile ring. In making Maddie, there were people and sources with particularly important information who couldn't quite take the step to speak with me on the record. That could change over time. Information was also passed on to me. We're sifting through that to see where and who it could lead to. So what do I think happened to Madeleine Beth McCann? I don't think Madeleine McCann was abducted that night. I think something else happened to her. I think Madeleine McCann died in apartment 5A. I think her body was disposed of. But by who? There is evidence that points to possible answers. Clearly, Operation Grange must go back to the very beginning and explore all possibilities. Anything less is a travesty. An innocent girl is still missing. Thank you so much to all of you for listening and supporting the MADDIE project. Thank you for the messages and all the information which has been sent to me. Dan McHugh, Simon King, and I would like to thank the following people for their invaluable contributions to the MADDIE project. Tara Blancado for graphics, maps, branding and artwork. Kaya Officer for legal counsel. Lucy Lowe, Tom Campagnoni, Damien Axiak, and Megan Wilson for video. Mark Dodd for support and graphics, Joe Abbey for media, Karishma Sakari for research, 9.com.au digital director Helen McCabe, and digital editorial director Kerry Elstub for backing this project. To all those who were interviewed and bravely went on the record to share their insights into the case, in order of appearance, Colin Sutton, Dr. Mark Perlin, Graham Wetton, Peter McLeod, Paolo Reis, Jim Gamble, Mark McLeish, Pat Brown, Sonia Poulton, Duarte Levy, Mick Swindells, Andy Redman, Paul James, Enid O'Dowd, Alessandra Villena, Joseph Mora, Ben Fordham, David Rudolph, Manuel S. Fonseca, Gonzalo Amaral, Martin Grime, and our translator, who wishes to remain anonymous. There is a group of people whose research was a tremendous help to make the podcast, and we would like to thank Lizzie Taylor, Ben Salmon, Cherry, Helen, Kay Linda, and Isabel McFadden. And to those who wish to remain anonymous, you know who you are. Thank you. This podcast is dedicated to Madeleine Beth McCann, born on 12th of May 2003. Though it seems you're unable to make it home, may truth be found and those who hurt you be brought to justice.
I have to say, I love the ending where he dedicates it to Madeleine.
Yeah.
So, yeah, and how great to add us to it. Hey, Carrie, you were in there. We were all there, and it was just enjoyable working with him and helping him. So that's the basic podcast, which I hope those details encourage you to go out and have a look at them. I will alert him to this video and hope he approves of what I've done, and maybe he'll send a message. That would be lovely if he could just send us a message to let you know that he hopes that you will watch also. So anyway, I guess we should move on now to Emily. Is Emily around? Have I gone on for so long that Emily is not available?
She was in the chat, so I'm just waiting to see if she makes a comment. And in the meantime, Carrie does acknowledge. Oh, yep, Emily's there. Carrie does acknowledge Mark. She says Mark is such a lovely man, and he was a pleasure. It was a pleasure helping him.
Yeah, I think that makes such a big difference, that he's such a nice chap. And you know, it's one thing for somebody to do this because it's their job. Well, it is Mark's job, but there was a lot more to it. And if you listen to the podcast, you'll see how personal it was for him. And as I say, that ending dedicated to Madeleine does it for me.
Yeah. So Emily is there. Do you have a link you can put in there for her to come up?
Okay, I've never done this before, but I've got a little thing that says invite. And so, that is to send via email. So I'm just going to put in the StreamYard address and I hope that works too. So does that come up? No?
Hold on, let me check. Yep, it came up.
Oh, great. So if Emily wants to hit on that, and actually, if there's anybody else who'd like to speak, we can have them. I'd love to have a guest up.
Just anybody that comes up, please try to be respectful.
Well, I'll kick them out if they're not.
Well,
I've got that ability. No, I mean, you don't have to agree with me, or with the general consensus about what happened.
Right.
I'm certainly open to everything. And okay, we have Emily. Hi, Emily. I'm just going to bring you on.
Hello.
Hi, Emily.
Hi.
That's great. And, first of all, do you agree that Mark's podcast looks worthy of everybody listening to it?
Yeah.
It's such a great one.
I haven't had time to watch it all myself yet. But from what little I've heard, it sounds very credible.
Yeah,
My
really good.
opinions have always been very low on the McCanns. I have autism from having epilepsy, and throughout my childhood and teenage year, well, from the age of, started about age 10, and I would have been, well, I'm 31 now, so I would have been, 14, 15 at the time the case happened. Back then, I couldn't really tell if people were being sarcastic. But when I watched the McCanns, it just screamed out that they were talking lies, that it wasn't the full truth. And if people like me who usually wouldn't see through sarcasm and duping can see that something is just terribly wrong, then you think that surely to those who don't have any disabilities, it should be blinding them that something is iffy.
Yeah, I think the majority of us saw that with the first interviews, where they're just so obviously there's issues. It's not, they just don't come across as parents that they were parents who've lost a child. And I believe that Madeleine died. So yes, of course, they're going to have that look of grief when they're talking, because they've lost Madeleine. But the look is not because she's been abducted, as far as I'm concerned. And in one of the videos, you can see where Kate is saying, well, no, we didn't. We searched. Well, we may not have done it physically, but we did a lot of work. I mean, that is not coming from a mother whose child is missing, and you will go to extreme lengths to check. So what you're saying is you saw that, right?
Yeah, I mean, here's the thing. I was watching those broadcasts live back when they happened, back on the TV, or back in, what was it, 2007? Was it?
Yeah.
That I was seeing those broadcasts live, and I was like, where are the tears? Why are they talking about her in the past tense?
And you know what? Absolutely. And you know what? At the time, I had an expats group, and I was admin of that group, and everybody kept asking me about the Madeleine case. I had a lousy computer, but so I couldn't watch actually any of the interviews. It didn't allow me to watch videos. That's how bad it was. But I still have the message that I sent out saying, was Kate crying? Because to me, one of the first things that I will look for in a case where a child is missing is the mother actually shedding tears? Not if she's crying, because yes, they all cry, but was she shedding tears? Because that's a big red flag to me which I think most of us had seen if we saw the I've forgotten the name, but there was another case of the child, the mother who drowned her children in the car.
Well, there was
It's just gone
several
from me.
years,
Blank.
several years after the McCann case here in the UK. I think, I can't remember where it was. There was a primary school child or whatever, somewhere around 11 or something, or give or take, that tried to copy the McCanns in saying that their daughter had gone missing. It was found out, I think, about, I don't know, several days to a couple of weeks later, that the uncle had been hiding the girl in his house in a bedroom, and she hadn't been abducted at all, or not by anyone stranger at all. And it's sort of, I really, it's
Yeah, there was some copycat efforts of some, and in actual fact, although it wasn't a copycat, there was Bianca Jones, who was a little girl that went missing in the States, and her father was questionable. So they brought in the same Martin Grime, who had the cadaver and blood dogs in the MADDIE case. They put him in, and they do have a video which shows that his dog Morse, at the time, Eddie and Keeler were no longer working, I expect, but Morse came in and did almost exactly what he did in the McCann case. And it shows Martin in the court case where he gave evidence about what Morse had found, the cadaver odor in the car, in the apartment, etc. And the father was actually found guilty, and it was based, as well as other stuff, on the evidence of the cadaver dogs. So it was used in a court case. Martin Grime's dog was used in the court case, and which ultimately found him guilty. And sadly, rest in peace, Bianca, her body has never been found. So
I think that if this had happened in the UK rather than Portugal, I think things would have been very different. Also, if this had been a family on benefits, it would have been very different. People are very quick to come in and judge and get the truth out of people of low income. Give it to people who are of higher income. There's so much corruption. I mean, I've seen with a current case of the Johnny Depp case, there's Johnny Depp having so much money that some people are trying to side with him, with his ex, because she trying to claim he's a wife beater. And although it's a totally different thing, I think it just goes to show that money speaks.
Emily?
Well,
there was a question in the chat for Emily. Martine O'Callahan asked if Emily believes, do they sound scripted to you?
I don't know if scripted is necessarily the word, but I think the McCanns have thought about what they want to get out, and they're just they only want to put out their own narrative of events. But
yes, I think we could all see that.
I don't know. I don't think I don't think necessarily scripted is correct, because I mean, sometimes, because otherwise they'd have necessarily thought of everything, and some of these sudden reactions from Jerry wouldn't have necessarily been the way they are, like when asked about the dogs and him pulling the microphone off and having a temper tantrum and things like that. It's, yeah, I think that it's very hard to say, but it's just so iffy. I mean, if you really did have your child kidnapped, why the changing of the story? Surely it would be fresh in your mind, and it would you if suddenly I got home and find my daughter was missing. I'd be frantic. Also, why leave the twins if you suspect your child of going missing? They had mobile phones. Why not ring why go all the way to the tapas bar to call the alarm? Why not ring Jerry on her mobile phone to call the alarm?
That's absolutely an issue which Gonzalo Amaral has claimed as a big red flag, is the fact she could have just yelled from the balcony over to the tapas, which at that point it would just be over the swimming pool, and yell from that way. Instead, she actually left the apartment. But what mother, and I'm sorry, it's not going to happen that any mother, when one of 3 children is supposedly taken, is going to leave the other 2 alone to go back and walk back when she could actually yell from the balcony. So I mean, that tells us a lot right there. And as you were just
sorry.
Oh, okay. And as Daniel Wiltshire has pointed out, which you said just now, Emily, is that this case showed the class divide is bigger than ever in the UK. And I think that is an absolute given, because even Martin Brunt referred to the fact that had it been, had they not been doctors, and had they, been somewhere else, this wouldn't have got to the point that it did get to. And also, that brings into the consideration that when all this happened, and when not presuming, but going by the opinion that I had, that it was a planned abduction, and the police believe that. The Portuguese police believe that Madeleine died, the parents hid her body, and they simulated an abduction. Now, at that time, back in 2007, this was before most of our Facebook groups and everything like that. So they would have had no idea at that time what this was going to move into, and the scrutiny that they would get. Initially, we just had forums. And at that time, this is why I have the name Heidi Ho, because at that time we were very anonymous. None of us really wanted anybody to know who we were. And so there was a lot of scrutiny. But then in 2012, I know our Madeleine group started. It was one of the first in 2012. And that's when it really, social media kind of took over in all the groups, and many of us started to have groups at that time. They would not have known that. So when they actually did this supposed simulation, probable simulation of the abduction, they would have had no idea what was going to happen. I mean, I think it hit them like crazy. And had they been just another couple that weren't doctors or as Martin Brunt says, weren't attractive and, had everything going for them, maybe it wouldn't have hit the media as much as it did. But I think it did, and it really shows how after hearing Mark and the fact of all the details that he's got, and he can go to the Prime Minister to offer free help and she's not interested, it tells you there's so much more than just about the McCanns. There is some kind of cover-up. There's some political cover-up. We don't know what it is, but yeah, this is.
I do know people. I do know one or two people who, due to not necessarily, I don't know whether they listen to the media or whether they don't listen to the media. I don't know whether it's because they just can't believe that parents could cover up something. I don't know what it is, but I do know one or two people who have been taken by what the Germans say and will unfortunately believe until proven otherwise that there's a possibility of Maddie being taken. Although one of the main people I know, a family member, okay, they believe that Maddie's dead, but they don't necessarily believe that the parents covered it up. But the thing I have is when that's all right if there's like one or two minor inconsistencies, you can expect that. People can't remember everything, but the sheer number, I mean, the McCann stories keep changing. They're about window and then the front door and the back door and things and about where they were and what they were doing. Pictures that were handed over. Most of them were had their time and date stamps edited. Why didn't they hand over the camera straight away? The dogs, the fact that the Tapas 7 can't give conclusive evidence of seeing Maddie. The weather patterns in particular photos, it's not one or two little minor things. I've got if once I go through it's sort of, you look at all the bits in chronological order of this case and it's just a whole list of things that just seem off. And how can, if they are innocent, why is there such a list of things that just don't add up?
Absolutely. And there's so much more to this, and we are only seeing a small part of it. I absolutely believe that the Portuguese police have everything on the case. I mean, we've seen the 40,000 police files, but the everything they have on the case, the intelligence that they have from day one, all the interviews with they know exactly. And I do know that they question a few things as far as whether it happened earlier in the week. One being that Jerry started to receive texts on Wednesday morning, 8 o'clock in the morning, and the Portuguese attorney, sorry, not attorney, the other chap, he actually went to the prosecutor, Portuguese prosecutor, went to what is considered the Supreme Court to get the information on these texts which arrived on the Wednesday morning. Now, they would not be interested in those texts if they didn't, since the files have been released, they wouldn't be troubled about those texts if they believed that Madeleine was abducted on the Thursday. And all these other details which point to something happening earlier, along with Rachel being questioned because she said that she saw Madeleine playing tennis on the Thursday. Well, we all know, well, we don't all know, but according to the booking form, according to the tennis coach, Madeleine played on the Tuesday. And when they questioned about which court she was playing in, Rachel described that wasn't the Lobsters court. It was a different court. Why would they question her that if they didn't think that she was not telling them the truth? And the fact that it was, she said it was Thursday when we know they were playing on the Tuesday, to me, tells me of a strong possibility that she was in fact trying to place Madeleine alive on Thursday. And that's why the police were questioning her. So I believe they do know. I absolutely believe they know something happened earlier in the week because of those, at least those two issues. There were more, but yeah, it's just an amazing case. But as Celtic investigators, I think Christian was dreamt up to take the heat off the Mark Perlin offer. Well, Gonzalo Amaral actually last year, when Mark was talking to him in the last episode, by the way, he was able to get to talk to Gonzalo Amaral, and as he said, he couldn't even say everything that he spoke about. You know, their lawyers were they had to be very careful with the lawyers, and so they couldn't put everything on. But when Mark spoke to Gonzalo Amaral, prior to that, Gonzalo Amaral had actually said that it was known that there was plans, or he believed there was plans to use this Christian Bruckner as a kind of a scapegoat for the case, to close the case. So that was just prior to Mark's podcast.
The problem I have with trying to use someone as a scapegoat is, A, why now with all the social media, and B, there was no evidence to suggest a breaking and entering and kidnapping. There wasn't any DNA. If he went through the window, as they claim, well, how could he get through the window carrying Maddie?
If you listen to the podcast, Emily,
the door, what? Yeah, it's like that. No, I'm just reiterating.
It's not possible.
It's sort of, it just doesn't add up. There's no fingerprints. There's no footprints. It just seems
there is
crazy.
no evidence. And Mark, when you listen to the podcast, Mark explains about the window, and Peter McLeod, who is he's one of our members in the forums and groups and everything. Sorry, I couldn't remember the name earlier. He actually is in Portugal or Spain, I'm not sure. But anyway, he went there, and there is a video of him trying to lift the shutters. And there was absolutely zero evidence that the shutters, which were the thing that, as Mark explained, the McCanns told everybody at home that night that the shutters had been gemmed and somebody had taken Madeleine out, when in actual fact, the following morning, you can see the forensic lady dusting the shutters, and the shutters, nothing had ever happened to the shutters. They were not damaged whatsoever. So at that point, they kind of had to change it.
Yeah, they only found Kate's DNA on the window.
They found Kate's fingerprints on the window. Yeah. She claimed the window was wide open, and I mean, there is so much. But rather than trying to explain it here, I just urge everybody, which I've been doing all day, to check the podcast, because you will learn things that even if you thought you knew everything, just is not so. And
well,
it's
my opinion back then was, if she's back when it happened, I thought, this just doesn't seem right. I don't think there's been a kidnapping, and if there has, then it just seems like maybe the McCanns had organised it. But as I've gone on, I've just thought and learnt more and more things, and watched videos and read things online and stuff. I think I've come to think that maybe, and with the dog's evidence and that, I just thought, I think something happened to her, and there's a very big possibility that it happened a day or two earlier. I mean, there was crying heard, what was it, the night before, and if it was Maddie, maybe she died that night because they weren't there, or possibly she could have passed away earlier in the week. But if it was her and alive the night before and she died the night before, I mean, it just
there's so much
and,
to answer
if she
for.
had been alive, and they say, as Kate says, and she was and Maddie said, why didn't you come when we cried? Well, why would you then go and leave your children again? Also, like, why did the twins not wake up? Could it be because they were drugged? And if they were drugged, is that why they're covered up the a death? You couldn't have. They'd lose their medical licenses. They'd lose the children. They'd lose their jobs.
Absolutely, yeah.
And people go to me, but why would someone cover it up? And why would friends cover it up for so many years? Well, I say to them, but what happens if they were also leaving their children and possibly drugging them? Surely, if you then admitted that your friends had been doing it, then maybe you've been doing it, and they would also lose their children. And then people start going,
you know what, Emily, I think you've raised a lot of good questions about why, all the curiosities of what happened and why it happened, and there's so much more to look into, and you know, hopefully over the weeks we'll be able to check into it and maybe answer more of the questions.
I think at some point what would be a good video is maybe also to put in in chronological order and put in the inconsistencies about what they said and when they said it, so that people can actually see all the changes and the inconsistencies in chronological order. It would give a good thing of about.
Funny you should say that.
And it sort of gives you an
Funny
idea
you should say
of
that, Emily. I actually, the very first video that one of the first videos that I did in this sequence, which I don't believe is still existing right now, so I'll either re-upload it or visit it again, is where I went over the discrepancies of the week from Monday to Thursday to Wednesday, and then the following week we did Thursday. And it just shows that after my research on all their statements, I put them all together, I put them in a timetable, and I did go through them chronologically, and I even managed to say that word. And you know, I think I should make a point of re-uploading some of those videos that we've lost, so that we can
but it would also
visit them
be
again.
good to...
But I'll tell you what, Paula, I think Paula wants to come on, so Thank you so much, Emily, for joining us. That's really, really good of you.
But before you go, Lizzie, but it would also be good to also see those discrepancies of what they say after her disappearance in what Kate and Jerry say on the interviews on TV and in newspaper, and in their we did this, then changing, oh no, this happened, then this happened, to also to see their inconsistencies and call out their, what do you call it, their so-called truths, but how they're actually probably lies, because their statements have changed, and how they've changed over the short time after they got the media involved.
Yeah, and that's probably a good idea. I think I'll check into that and see what I can do. So you've had some good,
yeah,
you've
because
had
of them
some great
saying
points,
first about the
Emily.
window, front door, back door, how it changed, and how the interviews with the 7:10 saying, oh, we were at this place at this time, then they're saying no, that we were at this place at this time. And what was it? One of them says that they went into the apartment, and then another one of them says that they didn't go into the apartment. And
there's so many of them.
Yeah.
There's so many of them, and I've addressed quite a few in some of the videos that I've done. But I'm going to look into that, and I really thank you for popping up here. You're our first guest that we've had, and I really appreciate you giving your time. I tried to contact you this week. I didn't hear from you, but at least you showed up today. And so I'll look forward to you being on again. So thanks ever so much then, Emily.
Yeah.
And I think we're going to get Paula up now. So, okay, thanks. Okay, bye-bye.
Lizzie, while
Yes?
you're getting Paula up, let me pull up the question. There was a question from Martine O'Callahan again. And I did see that Celtic investigator said I could do is answering the question was Martine, as I have firsthand experience. So Celtic investigator said that she could answer the question from Martine, as I have firsthand experience. So the question was Madeline neurodivergent in response to sedation differently? And so Melissa is saying she has experience with that.
Excuse me, Shirley, but you're using long words.
They're not my words. They're someone else's words.
Okay. Well, at least you said it.
So maybe Melissa's in the chat, and she says she has experience with that. So maybe if Melissa can just grab that link and come up and just answer that question.
Of course.
Paula.
Of course. What was I'm trying to practice picking up the messages on the bottom. Who was it who'd said that with the big long word?
It was Martine O'Callahan. Martine O'Callahan. Okay. So again, was Madeline neurodivergent? That's the word. I don't know what that
is. Okay, I'm having trouble finding it. Well, maybe we'll bring Melissa up and she will join us. But I tell you what, I'm also going to bring Paula up because I don't want to leave Paula sitting there. So I'm going to bring you both up, and maybe if Melissa can give us the details, and we'll just say hi to Paula for now. So, okay, and
hello. Hey guys, how you doing? Are you okay? Yeah, I'll just quickly answer that question. Obviously, just to let Martin know, I am a retired nurse, but also I've got a daughter with ADHD. Now, a girl's female ADHD sufferers are very different to boys. They present very differently. So with H, my child, she is very astute, but very on the go, very lively all of the time. Not misbehaving so much, but very, very busy, very intelligent, fun to be around, everything that Madeline is described as. So it's always made me wonder whether Madeline did in fact have ADHD diagnosis. Now, Hannah, one of my child, sorry, it's okay, Hannah, one of her main difficulties when she was a lot younger, she's older now, so she doesn't need it, but when she was a lot younger, one of her main problems was sleep. She just cannot sleep. And we did have a problem back in the COVID as well, which I'll tell you about as an aside, but she had problems with sleep when she was little, and there was just nothing we could do to settle her. Obviously, GP could not prescribe anything. It's well above his remit, sedating a child, you know, and it has to be prescribed by a psychiatrist over here in the UK. So she was referred to a child psychiatrist, and we went through weeks and weeks of assessments, got all of her problems. We had to deal with everything, and the doctor was, I am not prescribing until I am absolutely sure. I will not sedate a child. And in the end, he said, yeah, I agree. We've tried everything. I agree to prescribe melatonin. Now, melatonin is, it's basically a hormone. It's a hormone that we naturally produce, and it helps you get into that sleepy phase right before sleep. So, you know, when you're just going off to sleep, you're in that very sleepy phase, but you're still sort of with it. Well, apparently studies that ADHD children lack this hormone. So there is a hormone replacement therapy on the that can be prescribed, but obviously it's a sedative. So because it took us, I mean, she'd been referred at 5. It took me till about age 7 to get the prescription. I mean, she's got to be at about age 10, 11. As she was growing older, it was great. We didn't need it as much, so we stopped it until COVID hit, and she was off school, sat at home a lot, weren't we? We weren't going out much and all the rest of it back in March. It's much better now because at least she can do things. But back then it was awful. And her sleep deprivation got so bad that it knocked my sleeping off completely. So now I can't sleep at night. Still, I'm having trouble. Because one morning, 5 a.m, she got up and she blew my microwave up. And obviously there was nobody about. Now, she has got some learning disabilities, so even though she's 12, we don't allow her to cook, you know. So she's allowed to cook, but only with supervision. So obviously she'd gone in the kitchen on her own at 5 a.m. because she still hadn't slept from the night before. It was an awful period, you know, and from then on I couldn't sleep because I was listening out for what she was doing in the night, you know, and it went on for weeks and weeks and weeks. And once she got back into school and got back into her routine and got back into doing things, it settled down again, you know, but it's taken a long while, and still I've got insomnia, you know, as a result. But Hannah was very hard work as a child. She still has issues now and it can be very hard work, but I can see how somebody would easily lose their temper as well if they were so inclined, if they had a child like Hannah. It was actually me and Hannah's my marriage to her father ended a long time ago. She was only a toddler, but I did meet somebody and we were together for 4 years. And he had a heart attack and attributed it to Hannah's behaviour, and we broke up as a result. But I wanted it. It was initiated by me, you know. But you can see how stressful her the be with a child with such disabilities, you know. But everything within all of them, whether it was David Payne talking about her, whether it was Jerry and Kate talking about Maddie. I'm like, gosh, she sounds like my Hannah, you know.
That really is something which I'm glad you and Martina brought to the forefront, is that it's something we don't discuss, or at least I don't discuss, because I only go with the facts of the case. But we do know from Madeleine's personality that she was really exuberant, and the way they talk about her is as you say. Now, whether or not they actually used of what you're saying, I mean, that's like Prozac and Zoloft,
No,
is that right?
I would suggest, because they wouldn't have even been able to prescribe it, they would have needed to have gone through the assessments with me. Now, the thing is, I'd been asking for help from when she was 3 years old. CAMS in the UK, excuse me, I'm going to cough. Excuse me. A CAMS in the UK, which is Child Adolescent Mental Health Services via the NHS, they will not assess a child until that child is aged 5. So there are other sedatives on the market. They wouldn't have been able to get a prescription for Madeleine at that age, because they'd at first need to get to see the child psychiatrist. But the child psychiatrist won't see them until they're 5. They say it's impossible. At that young age, it's impossible to diagnose, because toddlers are busy and all over the place and hard work, aren't they? So they have to wait until they're sufficiently developed child development wise before they can then do their assessment. And it's not until after those assessments will they even consider sedation. So yes, there are other things on the market which I could have accessed, and as a nurse I obviously knew about them, but I wouldn't. But they were on the market, and they are available.
And,
you know.
And hi, Paula.
If I went into the chemist and said,
I'm just going to say, I beg to differ on that. I have 4 children, one of which is what we're talking about. But that's not down to the child, that's down to me. So I'm not going to get into this conversation, because, you know, like I say, I beg to differ on it. And I had a doctor in the 80s that said to me that ADHD and all of these things were given a name for the parents that couldn't cope with their kids. So I'm going to sit back and just listen.
Okay. Yeah, that's fair enough. I mean, if you came and lived with my child for 6 weeks, you'd probably have a different view.
No, that's not fair.
So you're saying it's my parenting.
I said,
it's my parenting. I think, I think
I'm not
so back down.
No. I'm not criticising your parenting. I'm saying that I have 4 children, and I have one of the 4, which is what we're speaking about. And so
but you're
saying
for saying that saying that, you're saying to me, you weren't managing your child's needs properly, so you
No. I'm not criticising parenting at all. That's not what I'm saying. No, you're wrong about that. I'm just saying that there are other ways of dealing with ADHD. Didn't exist in the 1920s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s. You know, this is a new thing. And so what I'm trying to say, you know, is that although it's been given a name, it doesn't necessarily mean that.
Well, I beg to differ, because my brother was born in 1979, and no doubt in my mind that my brother has ADHD. But back in the 80s, he was diagnosed as having food intolerance to all the E numbers and all the rest, because that was the craze that back then. They didn't know enough. But we're now in 2020.
Yeah, but
and
doesn't
know a
that
lot more
mean
about
something?
it, you know?
Doesn't that actually spell out to you that yes, I remember all the E numbers back in the 80s because that's when I had my children, and you know, so we didn't give them all the E's in the products that we fed them with, but that also speaks volumes about ADHD and all that other stuff. That's just a label.
And don't you think that was done way before any assessments were done on my child? Everything was looked at. Her diet was looked at. We had dietitians that had a look at her diet. Everything's done before you ever get to a prescription. Everything else is done. But what I'm saying is, what I was saying was, if under 5, before she'd have hit the psychiatrist, I wanted to go off and get medicine for my daughter that would sedate her, I would have to go in to a chemist and say, I'd like to buy this over the counter. And they say, oh, what would you like that for? And I'd have to say, or they'd say, who's that for? And I'd have to say, it's for myself, it's for travel sickness. And that can be used, and that is used by parents that shouldn't be using things like that. And I never did that with my child, but it makes me wonder if, because Hannah hadn't, because Madeline hadn't reached the age of 5 to be able to have proper assessments, she was so difficult to manage that they were quite happy to give her this drug. And I'm not going to mention the drug because I don't want people looking it up, but it could have been that they thought, right,
and if I can interject
we
here,
need something, we're going to give that, we're going to go out, we're going to go out, we're going to give her that. And by giving her that drug, that's where they were going wrong, because they'd be giving it illegally in the UK.
Yeah, but don't you think that too many drugs are given to children?
Absolutely. I mean, I was even before we got the sedation, they tried to put my child on Ritalin. We tried it for 3 months, and it was abhorrent to see how my child changed and what that drug did to her. She was a zombie. It was awful. So that was stopped straight away. Yet the melatonin that they gave me, because it's a replacement hormone, it's very natural. It's natural.
Can I interject here?
Yeah, but are we talking about natural drugs, or are we talking about drugs that work?
Well, this is where I'm saying there's a difference. Age 5 and above, you would be able to get the hormone replacement therapy on prescription. Below 5, you wouldn't be able to get it. And then
but what I'm trying to say is, back in the day, children didn't need all this stuff. They didn't need all these drugs in order to,
I'd say that my mother could have done with a lot more help with my brother back in the 80s. And I'm so glad that there is that help out there.
Yeah, but I'm talking about the 60s, the 70s, the 50s.
Okay, before you go any further.
Sorry, Lizzie.
But no, that's been really interesting, and I'm really pleased to hear it, and I'm so glad there's two sides to a story and that we can see it. But I just wanted to interject, because although it may be an issue with Madeline, it's not one of the primary issues that we really want to deal with right now. I mean, that's great. I've enjoyed hearing both sides, and I have my thoughts on the issue too. But I think where we were going is whether or not that was the case with Madeline, whether she needed those drugs to help her be a different personality. But the thing that where the drugs are involved, I think, is more about whether they were given Calpol to help them sleep, which Gonzalo Amaral has claimed was the case. And at that time, I think there was a difference in the Calpol to what there is today.
No,
I
completely agree with that, Lizzie.
It was
and I think that if they gave Calpol, I think they gave a little bit more than I'm gonna mute. Sorry.
Right. The Calpol was different then in that Calpol is the same Calpol, but there was a higher up, and that was the Calpol, which is paracetamol, mixed with the drug I'm talking about, which I'm not going to go into. It's since been banned. Yeah?
Yeah, so you could have a very good
back
case.
in 2007.
So are we talking Finnegan? Because Finnegan back in the 70s, 80s was a really big.
Yes. Yeah, that's the
okay. Yeah, okay, I'm with you. Yeah, I'm with you.
Yeah.
Okay, so what we're saying,
there to give people ideas of how to get a hold of it.
But what we're saying here is that as Gonzalo Amaral claims that they were given Calpol, which, as I mentioned previously, was a different formulation than it is today, but that in addition to what you're suggesting they may have used, could have been an indication of why something happened.
Yeah.
Why so? You see, the important thing that I want to make sure everybody knows is one thing I don't go into is how she died and when she died exactly. But it is interesting to hear one of the possibilities could be, as you're talking about right now, is that although Gonzalo Amaral claims that Calpol may have been the reason, and we do know that the children, who probably wouldn't have needed this other, the twins, who wouldn't have needed this other medication, did not wake up during all the everything that was happening that night. But if initially Madeleine had been taking what you suggest is a possibility, and then with Calpol on top, that could have caused a lot more major issues that may not have been known about. So and the other thing is, I do want everybody to realize that it's always possible, because I do believe that the children were being looked after by other members, that the children, as we have as it's been suggested, that they were looked after in one apartment. And if the person looking after them in that apartment, no specific names mentioned, but if one person was looking after them and decided to give Madeleine Calpol, not realizing she was on another medication, and if something happened because of it, and that in itself may give a reason why the Tapper 7 became involved and tried to hide what had happened, because it wasn't necessarily, we don't know what happened to Madeleine. It could have been something directly related to Kate or Jerry, or it could have been an accident, which we all believe, I think, is an accident, although Gonzalo Amaral does suggest the actual investigation has never actually claimed that. But if that's the case, and another of the Tapper 7 were looking after Maddie and other children that night and accidentally gave her Calpol, which, you know, is presumably acceptable to give children, is it possible that Madeleine was on this other medication and that created a problem? And
I don't know, you know, because the paracetamol, which is Calpol, hasn't really got any sedative. I know people say it usually makes their child sleep, but I'd say you're giving it to get rid of a pain or some suffering, and because you've settled that pain, you've enabled the child to sleep. My sister works in ITU, and I remember her saying to me, and she's quite right, paracetamol is the safest drug out there. Unless it's taken in huge quantities that damages the liver, it's the safest drug out there, you know?
Yeah, but was the Calpol in 2007 a different, which it was a different formulation to what it is now?
Well,
so was that the issue?
This Calpol Night, even though I've heard and I've been told that it was available back then, I had children in my first child was 1996, and I was never aware of it, which makes me wonder if it's prescription only. And if it was prescription only, they could have got a prescription for it in quite a nefarious way.
Yeah.
Well, for my take on this, I'm just saying that the drug Finnegan that was given to kids in the 80s would knock them out for like 12, 15 hours.
Yeah. So mixed with...
So if that was, you know, combined with Calpol, then that would suggest to me that the reason why the twins didn't wake up... am I wrong on that?
Yeah, no, the reason that I would just think that it doesn't matter because the paracetamol wouldn't cause any more. I just think if Finnegan is banned in this country from being given to children, that tells me that there must be something wrong with the drug, that you shouldn't give it to children because it oversedates them and they risk death. And, you know, there's also the possibility that they did have this prescription and, you know, I've done it before, maybe didn't check it with each other. Have you given this medication? Not that we've overdosed any of our children, but you're like, where's my husband? Has he given one of the children paracetamol? And you're having to phone him to check before you give it, you know? So that could have easily been done. Maybe Jerry gave her some and then Kate came along and thought, oh, I better give her some medicine. You don't know, you know?
Yeah. And I think that's the point of it regarding the medicine. I don't want to go further into the medical, the medicine side of it, because as I say, I don't like to deal with how she died.
No,
it could be anything.
Facts, have we? We're just
absolutely. We don't know. We do know there was blood. Now in the apartment, yes, there was blood on the tiles. Any of my videos claim was under the tiles, I discovered later was actually from the officer who lifted the tiles, because the dogs came back a second time, which a lot of people don't realize. So the blood on the tiles had all the components of Madeleine, but we don't know. Madeleine was in the apartment, so they cannot be used as evidence against any crime, because Madeleine was in the apartment. So there, you know, there could have been blood from her at any point. And just to mention about the fact about the crime, I want to remind you another reason that the McCanns or the Portuguese police haven't actually charged anyone is because at the point back then when the files were released, there was no knowledge of which crime to charge anybody with. They didn't know if she'd been abducted. They didn't know if something had happened to her. They had what they believed was the evidence that forensic evidence that it was her blood later. But as far as it went back then, they couldn't charge anybody because there was no, and I've got the graphics in the archive thing. I'm so clever, aren't I? That they couldn't actually charge anybody because it's, as somebody told me, how can you charge somebody and say, I charge you with, well, I'm not sure. And that was a really good reason why nobody was charged, because there wasn't any evidence one way or the other.
But maybe if the UK had supported the PJ, this case would have been solved. I think you know, a lot was hidden from them. Yeah, I think that the PJ did do it. They solved it, didn't they? But they just didn't. I
absolutely believe they've solved it. Yeah, I absolutely.
They can't prove it, but whether the UK held things back, they held back other evidence, you know, didn't they? Jerry's cats thing and stuff like that.
Well, yeah, I mean, yeah, I always steer clear of that because we don't know. I mean,
and
it
a
could
medical
be that he
records
was
and things like
lifted.
that as well.
But the point
you know?
is, the point is, I think that the Portuguese police do know what's happened. They do have the evidence. But when you stop and think, what happened in the OJ case? They had, I think, like 200, 300 pieces of blood evidence. They had evidence coming out. I nearly said something I shouldn't. But they had all the evidence needed. But then Johnny Cox on another route, and that mistake was made of testing the gloves while wearing nylon gloves, and basically he got away with it. And I don't think the Portuguese police are willing to go to the extent of any trial without absolute proof. And that proof obviously comes from either the body and the results they find from the body, or if one of the friends confesses. Although I do believe that they have actually changed their statements from what I understand. But yeah, so that's what they're waiting for, I think.
Yeah, I think sadly the PJ can't afford to. And I think it comes simply down to that.
I'm sorry, I missed that last bit.
Yeah, I was saying that the the PJ probably can't afford to take this further. So, I think it simply comes down to that, in my opinion.
Well, I'm not sure that afford is an issue so much as having absolute 100% proof. Because, I mean, even if they could afford it, I still don't think they'd actually go ahead unless they had that 100% proof. Because the McCanns, we all know the McCanns have, with the cover up and everything, they have so much on their side. Look at Carter Ruck. They're the most feared lawyers in the UK, and they have them backing them. Now, the PJ have to go against that, and I don't think they'll do it unless there's 100% proof.
You are so on the ball with that. Yeah, you are absolutely right.
You got it, Lizzie.
Well, it's what I believe, and I do have trust. I think most of us who follow the case have trust in the PJ. I also, as I mentioned earlier, have a quite a degree of trust in Scotland Yard Operation Grange, although I do not know whether the basic investigation at the time when I was talking to the detectives, I absolutely believed them, and I think they believed it too. They spent this one detective spent so much time with me, so good. He'd contact me at different times and never made me feel like I was being a nuisance, which, and he'd chat to me for quite some time and assured me that everything was okay. But the thing is, we don't know whether the higher echelons have changed that. And, time will tell. I really do believe, I believe so much in the PJ that I believe that something will happen. Gonçalo Amaral, as he said, when he was asked, will this case be solved? And he said, when the political will falls into place. And I would like to believe that. I would absolutely like to believe that. And also and to go back to why we're here, to go to the podcast where Mark is really, really pushing the boundaries as far as I'm concerned. I've never, I mean, I have to say, I believe he's the best investigative journalist going, but I'm not, that I've seen, and I'm not someone who is familiar with others that may be good. But I do believe that Mark is going to push it. And I'm really looking forward to the rest of this. They've taken her podcast to find out where he's taking it. In fact, I might try and find out some of the directions they're going with the podcast. Whether he tells me or not, I don't know. But who knows? He's pushing it so far that when somebody goes to the Prime Minister, and he's right up there as far as pushing it. And I'm hoping that this podcast coming up, and I don't know when it will be, but certainly he'll let me know, and I'll let you know. And who knows, he might hit on something that absolutely exposes something. I'm so looking forward to it. If anybody's going to do it, Mark's going to do it. So please do subscribe to his podcast. Of course, they were number one last year because so many of us subscribed, and it was such a great podcast. And let's do the same for him now. Let's support Mark. His Twitter is Mark Salnokonoko, and they also have a Twitter for the podcast, which is They've Taken Her. So subscribe to that, and let's give him all the support possible, because if anybody's going to help us, I think Mark can do a good job. And
I think he is. He's got them rattled, hasn't he?
Oh, he's. What did you think of the? Have you heard the podcast?
The first one with Christian Bruckner.
Yeah, if I was to interject, I would say that I agree with everything that you've said, Lizzie. Other than Operation Grange, I don't think they're doing a great job. I really don't, and that's just my opinion. So I don't want to offend anyone, but
yeah, well, you won't offend me on that, because.
Sorry, come on.
You won't offend me. You won't offend me regarding my opinion of Operation Grange, because the only thing is, as I've mentioned, I spoke to them, I believed in them, I talked about the podcast about the whitewash with them, and I was absolutely believe what I was told at that time. But I do not know now whether the higher echelons have popped in and changed everything. So although I could be correct in my belief from years ago, when it first started, it may all be different now. But I do believe in being positive. And if I thought for 1 second that I knew that this case was just going to be closed for some reason other than the truth, what's my point in being here? There is no point. I would give up right there. So all the time you see me around, you know that I believe there is something that's going to happen. And it's not something that I've always said in the group. It's nothing. We are not here to try and solve the case. That's the last thing we're doing. My particular hope is that the UK can actually learn the truth from the files. That's what I believe in. That's why I've done everything I've done for 13 years, is to get the truth to the UK, whether it be by videos or just by our group, by connecting with everybody, by this. That's all I want.
It works, everything that's out there, Lizzie, and you were involved in that, whether it come from the files, whether it come from yourself on YouTube, whether it come from Twitter, Madeleine Case tweets, the whole MADDIE community has kept it out there. And the reason I feel that in the UK people have took notice is you only have to read every time it was prior to Christian Bruckner, I must admit, but prior to Christian Bruckner, most of the comments on the newspapers would all be the parents did it, the parents did it, the parents did it. And it would be right through the thread of comments. So I think most of us know It's just the gas.
I think for me, it's more about you know, like I say, I'm talking about Operation Grange here, and I don't have a lot of respect for them.
No, I don't.
But I do understand all the other, you know, the other people that are coming in, and but I'm literally talking about Operation Grange, and I don't have a lot of respect in that department.
The two spokespersons, which would have been the first SIO, and then Mark Rowley, which I think he was the second or the third SIO, they both said in interviews that unequivocally the McCanns are not involved, yet they haven't shown us a jot of evidence to prove that claim. That's my feeling on Operation Grange.
Okay, so excuse me. So I've looked on YouTube today, and there's a few things flying around, and one of them is that Jerry has left Kate for another person,
Yeah, I've heard
another
that.
woman. You know, and so does that mean that Kate may come out and speak a little bit more? I don't know.
I know that
There's
Madeline
so much
Case
that could
tweets.
happen.
Yeah, Madeline Case tweets did put out last night. I said to you, Lizzie, last night, didn't I? That there has been a tweet from Isabel this week with some intel from Rothley. And I must say as well, that's the second time I've read on Twitter from a resident of Rothley. And they're very much, the first time I was told that Jerry, pre-COVID, had been seen out and about wine and dining a new lady. And when I asked her how she knew that, I live in Rothley, was her response. And this time was a tip off to Isabel. And it was similar. Jerry's got a new partner and he's nowhere to be seen. Kate is still in Rothley. She looks very old and nobody believes her. She walks around with her head down and nobody talks to her because they all believe she was involved.
Yeah, well, I'm about 20 minutes.
And also,
I literally am 20 minutes away.
Oh, are you?
Yes, from Rothley.
Well, pop along there, Paula, and get some info for us.
I can't do that. Yeah. You know, I would like to, but you know, my personality, I can't do it. I would love to, but I can't.
Before you go any further, I meant that as a joke because you know there's one thing which is important, and that is for me, for what's important for me, I do not and never have tried to contact anybody on a personal level to find out information that way. I don't believe in it. I've never done it. I never will do it. So my suggestion to you was purely, absolutely, not just a joke that I'm covering up for, but a joke that because you're so close. And I want to add too, while we're talking about living very close, there's another person that lives close to them who absolutely believes that they are innocent. And do you know, that is important to actually hear those people who claim they're innocent, because it's important, because you have to look at what they say and what they believe and why they believe it. And it gives us the opportunity to second guess ourselves as to whether we're right or whether there might be some issues. Because quite honestly, I've learned a lot from those that don't think the same as I do. And it's important. In most cases, I can second guess myself and still come up with the same answer. But occasionally, you can wonder. And I'm going to mention her name, Pam Gurney. I mean, I've been in touch with Pam for years. A lot lot of people claim she's.
I'm really stunned you mentioned her name.
Pardon?
I'm really stunned that you mentioned Pam Gurney's name. I'm like,
No,
is she really still around?
Yeah, she is. And do you know what? Don't be stunned. I've been in contact with Pam from the start. When I chat to people, I chat to the person. Now, Pam and I have totally different opinions. But do you know what, Pam? Actually, I'm not interested in the pros that are trying to prove us wrong. But Pam absolutely believes they're innocent. And that is real to me. We get on other cases because we're both born in the same year. So we talk about Dave Clark and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah,
but the point is with Pam, what really, really upsets me is that one day I asked her if the McCanns actually know what a huge supporter she is. And she said, well, I don't know, she said, because she sent Kate a birthday card. And she doesn't know if Kate actually I can't remember the story, but she doesn't actually know if Kate saw it or answered it. And I think that's
literally flooring me.
Yeah, don't be.
Yeah,
don't be,
okay.
because
Wouldn't it be
I think it's
wonderful?
important. I think it's
Wonderful
important
if
that we
social
all.
media. Wouldn't it be wonderful
Pardon?
if social media? Wouldn't it be wonderful if social media is just like you, Lizzie? Everybody argues. Everybody thinks they're right. Everybody argues on Twitter, and they won't listen to the other side. But maybe if we all lived and just listened to each other, and accepted other people have got different opinions to us, then we'd be all very much happier.
Yeah, but we're talking Pam Gurney here, so I'm really interested in Liz's response.
Well, let me tell you, Paula, from the start, Pam started, I think when it started was Pam started commenting on my videos back when I first started. And one day, I think she popped, I'm not sure if she popped into the videos or whether I'd contacted her and wished a happy Christmas. And from that time on, we took on a personal comment, discussion. I mean, at one point, I counted how many messages I'd had between Pam and I, and it was like 50,000. I mean, we were just in contact. Now, she was like my surrogate husband, where we used to argue all the time, but then we'd stop and she'd tell me. She gave me a mince pie recipe one Christmas, which included cranberries, and of course I didn't get cranberries so I could never make it. But this is important to me. Most people know that I speak to anybody. They may be adversaries of other people, even the people after me, even the people that were making fun of me and making rude or nasty videos about me. I'd still chat to them, because I think my thought in life in general, not just in this case or in any other case, is that if somebody wants to accuse me of something and I'm guilty of it, then I will apologize. If I'm not guilty of what they accuse me of, then it's their issue. It's not anything to do with me. So I look past that, and I've chatted with so many people. And in one particular case, there, I don't know if you remember back in the MADDIE case in the early days, there was a chap that did all the satirical pictures. What was his name? Something Cox, Dave or something? No, not Dave Cox. Something. And he had thousands of different profiles, and of course I recognized every one of them. But he put out some really nasty things about me. in fact, he was the instigator of me actually using my initial controversy group. I had a group, which is still in effect. They haven't changed the name because I don't think they can. Madeleine McCann Controversy Group.
Yeah,
And he was the instigator where I was kicked out. Even though I was the admin, I was kicked out. And it was funny when that happened, because I remember thinking, oh my goodness, I think this was August of 2013. I thought, oh my goodness, I can take a day off. I was so happy. I went off to work, had a mobile phone, so I didn't know what was happening. So I'm working away thinking, oh my goodness, when I get home, I'll have a day off. And when I got home, there was 400 of my members all ready to set up into a new into a new group, which is my current group, Heidi Ho Controversy of Madeleine McCann. And anyway, I carried on chatting to him, as well as the other admin who bumped me, kicked me out. And they're really nice people. I mean, they had their issues and they thought they believed in what they did. So anyway, I'm really happy to still be in contact with them. And this one day, he said to me, he said, you know what? I had a light bulb moment. I think that was when I came up with the fact that there was, if there was no abduction, there could have been no, if there was no neglect, there couldn't have been no abduction. In which case, I mean, unless there was neglect, they couldn't have claimed abduction. And that's why it's one of the mantras that they allow in the media to be mentioned about, oh, well, they were dining, you know, so far away and they left the children alone. They've left that because without that, there wasn't the opportunity for abduction. And he told me at the time, he said, you know, he said, you've got skin thicker than the re-entry tiles on the space shuttle. And that's absolutely true. Anything anybody wants to call me or say to me is, no, it's not going to upset me. So in that case, I can chat to anybody, and Pam is one. And I believe she thanked me for mentioning her on the last video. But she was kind of an icon. I don't believe for 1 second she was the Twitter account that everybody claims she was. But it's important for us to look at the other side. When I was in the MADDIE case files, there was one pro McCann in there that I love talking to, Snowy. I never knew whether, I always believed it was one of the, not necessarily one of Carter Ruck's lawyers, but I think somebody who was involved in that particular way, and they used to use big words on me. But I loved it because it gave me a chance to second guess my thoughts. And if I couldn't come back to the same conclusion, then it was great to be able to hear another side. So please, everybody, give other people a chance to say what they feel. And if it's different to yours, doesn't make them a different person. It just, you know, it's just another thought, different opinion. That doesn't make the person terrible. So no, I get along with Pam fine, thank you. And I know it may surprise you, Paula. That's just the way I'm happy. It's what keeps me happy.
Well, if I can just respond to that.
Yeah.
So
no,
I
Paula, no, I'm not listening to you.
Yeah. So in my opinion, and it is only my opinion, I don't think the kids were left alone. And that's something that I've thought, you know, for a few years. If we're going to talk about Pam, okay, so I can remember back in the day. So I'm a member, a sub of many of the MADDIE channels, and yours, you know, is included in that. But I haven't been active for years. But I can remember sort of making a comment on probably the negative side of the McCann case. And Pam came on and, you know, she shot me down as she does because that's her personality. And I'm not going to lie, I told her she was vile and all that sort of crap. And I got blocked and deleted and all that sort of shit. But it would be interesting for me all these years later for her to come to me and speak to me and just give her side of things, because I'm listening to you, Lizzie, and you've obviously built up a relationship. That isn't something that, you know, I did years back. But I'm literally open to suggestion, and I would absolutely listen to her side of things today. That's all I'm going to say.
Well, you know what? That's lovely to hear. I in fact, maybe I'll reach out to Pam and see if she'll come on with me and discuss a few things, because I don't know. A lot of people put. I actually allowed her into our group one day, and it was just a one-off where she was allowed to do one thread with us. And I'll tell you, a lot of people really, really hated that. Some left me. It was quite controversial at the time. But it's what I believe, that let's hear what somebody else has to say. And if it means that I lose people, then maybe they're not the people I want to follow me. There is nothing wrong, in my opinion, to hearing a secondary point of view.
Well,
so
I probably at the time would have left too. I haven't left any of the MADDIE groups. I'm still, excuse me, I'm still in all of them, but I don't look in them very often. And Pam was one of these people that I was so against. So I would love to have a conversation with her and change my opinion. That's because obviously I'm open-minded. And I'm talking years ago that I was in all these groups, and, you know, she was very pro McCann and all that kind of stuff and what have you. So I would love to, after all these years, have a conversation.
Well, that's great. And the thing still stands. And other people may totally disagree with me. And if I only get one viewer alive and include Pam, and if I only get one viewer, that is secondary to me hearing her side of it and why she feels the way she does, because she is a real human being. We do get along. We were born the same year, as I say, and to be honest, there was more to it than that, because dare I say that the one night, and this is difficult for me to say, okay, the one night my niece was dying, Pam was there for me. It was a time when I couldn't get hold of anybody else. I wasn't able to get to the hospital. Pam stayed with me. That is important to me. And that was after I decided to be her friend. I mean, this wasn't the deciding factor. This was just part of my relationship, in inverted commas, with Pam. Another time, as we're discussing family, we discovered that her father was in the RAF, the same as my brother. And as we're going through, I showed her where I'd gone to my brother's passing out parade in Barry in 1965, I think it was. And her father was there. She went to that same passing out parade. Now, what her father had passed away the year or so before that. But what I discovered was, talking to my brother, it was her dad that had trained my brother. And this was only last year we discovered this. And my brother thanked her, although, sadly, she wasn't able to pass it on to her dad, but thanked her for the fact that her dad was part of his life and put him on the right path to where he is or has been today. That is huge. Now think about, that was after my decision to be a friend. It wasn't a deciding factor, but those two occasions would not have existed if I hadn't have been her friend and chatted to her. And I certainly wouldn't have got that mince pie recipe, which I still have to do. So there's so much more to people than just their opinions. And I hopefully we can do that. And if I get her on, then certainly, Paula, I'll make sure that you're around and you can maybe ask her some of the questions that you want to, even if we've only got one viewer at the time.
Yeah, I would really like to speak to her, because my opinion, and we're talking years ago, has been negative. So it would be nice to speak to her and, maybe change my opinion.
Well, it's not so much changing opinion, it's understanding others' opinions and accepting them. And now, don't think for 1 second that Pam hasn't made comments that I am totally upset with, that I totally don't like. It doesn't mean by accepting her that I agree with what she's done. Maybe she's justified, and in her opinion, I'm sure she believes she's justified. But the opinion is something totally different. And it's good. I think the important thing is to understand why she has that opinion. What does she know that we don't know? What does she see that we don't see? And
this is something that I've thought about over the years, because her passion is clearly a pro McCann, and I would like to understand that. I would like to understand why. I want to know the whys and wherefores, and obviously when I put my opinion across on her channel years ago, we're talking now, it didn't get accepted, and I was blocked and all the rest of it. But I would like to have a conversation with her, and just understand, I want to see things from every side, every angle, but I don't think she'd ever be willing to do that with me.
Well, I don't know. We never know. I'm going to ask her. In fact, she knew that I'd mentioned her last week, so maybe she may have even been listening right now. And if she is, why don't you pop in, chat, Pam, and give us a little message. But overall, whatever. And as I mentioned before, don't believe she was this truly Judy or whatever everybody was claiming she was. So she got the blame for a lot, and she didn't even know what was happening in Twitter, because at that point I totally believe she did not have Twitter. So she was made into this icon that even she wasn't aware of as I was talking to her. So let me see if I can arrange something with her. I would love to, whether it's separate for just us and a couple of viewers, or whether it's something which others would be willing to listen to, the other side of the story. What she lives near the McCanns. She absolutely believes that Kate is is or the McCanns are innocent, and that's important. I think that's as important as our opinion is. So
Yeah,
I'm gonna.
I don't live far away. I'm like 20 minutes away from Rothley, and it, so it's pretty local, I suppose, to me. Oh gosh, Pam's not going to speak to me. I don't think so, because, like I say, a few years ago, and we are talking years ago, like 5, 7. Because I was with the MADDIE case from the beginning, and although I sit in the sidelines, I'm pretty clued up. Again, with the Watts case as well. So she's not going to speak to me.
We don't know, Paula.
Speak to me.
You can't presume anything. She may not even want to come on to speak to me, but it would, and I know that, I say I know, from what I understand, she has been probably banned from chat because it's very difficult in chat to not create aggro. As we all know, it's very easy for everybody to turn against somebody, and it ends up just not being very nice in chat. So although I said I would like to address Pam separately, I can totally understand if she'd said anything that would cause disruption in chat, then of course we can't accept that. And I would only take her on as a guest if she was willing to just speak normally as a person. And I really believe that that's something that maybe she could do. So let's look at that as a possibility in the future. I'll have a chat with her and see what she thinks. I'll send her the link to this if she's not already watching, and because Pam knows what's going on, and let's see in the future. But you know what? I think I've gone on so long today. I like to try and keep it around 2 hours or so, and I think I've gone way overdue. Unless there's anything else that is really something which I need to address today, is there anything, Shirley?
No, there's not.
Okay. So I think at this point, I'd like to thank Emily for popping up and chatting to us, Melissa, and you, Paula, and of course, Shirley, who's always around here telling me what I can and can't do. and for all the admin who've been helping, the mods who've been helping check out all the messages, and hopefully not banning too many people. Carrie, of course, for always coming up with the links. Cherry, who's usually in the background, bumping messages and threads that are appropriate for the current live, and anybody else that's been involved that I've totally forgotten about. I want to thank you all, and thanks everybody for joining us today, including Chris and Kim, who are my most revered and important viewers. So thank you so much, everybody. And I don't know what we're going to cover next week, but let's hope it's something that is worthy of watching. And in the meantime, please check out Mark's podcasts and Sonia's channel, where you'll learn more about MADDIE. So I'm going to say bye-bye for now. And so is Shirley.
Lizzie, thank you.
Thank you, and everybody have a good night.
Okay. So thank you, everybody. And I'm not going to just leave the studio, which I did last week, where it continued. I'm actually going to go up into the top right-hand corner where it says end broadcast. So I'm getting really professional at this. And look forward to seeing you same time, same place next week. So thanks, everybody, and bye-bye for now.